On the 6th of September 1945, a ruthless and brutal Nazi official was brought out to a courtyard for his execution inside of Prague. Josef Pfitzner became the last man to be publicly executed in Czechoslovakia, outside the walls of a prison which became notorious for its brutality during the Second World War. Josef Pfitzner was a terrifying beast who was made the deputy mayor of Prague, and along with Reinhard Heydrich, the Reich protector of the land, who became known as a butcher of Prague, he was responsible and complicit for the deaths of many people and for the terror that emerged inside of the nation. But high up in front of a group of roughly 50,000 spectators, Josef Pfitzner was executed on a gallows on the platform. The executioner secured the noose around the neck of Pfitzner as he stared gravely down at the huge crowd that had gathered to see his demise. Welcome to The Untold Past. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Josef Pfitzner was born on the 24th of March 1901, and he was the son of a shoemaker. He lived inside of Czech lands, and after studying history at a German university in Prague, he became a professor in the Department of East European History. He spoke fluent Czech, however in the 1930s he joined the Sudeten German Party, and Adolf Hitler, the Nazi Führer, had one eye on taking this region. Hitler saw the Sudetenland and much of Czechoslovakia as lands that he wanted to take, and he claimed he wanted to unite German speakers under his Reich and Empire. Hitler was handed over the Sudetenland without much problems following the Munich conference, but Josef Pfitzner was attracted to Nazism, and he had been a member of the Austrian Nazi Party, but following the German occupation of the Czech lands, Pfitzner then joined the Nazi Party, and he became an activist for them. He wrote many pro-Nazi works and rubbed shoulders with many high-ranking Nazis who would later become ruthless murderers. With regards to what Hitler wanted from Czechoslovakia, he wanted control of the armaments production in the land, as he wanted this to arm his military, and he later, with the occupation and invasion, seized many factories. Hitler realised that he needed to keep the people under control, and specifically under submission, as he wanted them to work harder later for the German Reich. A reign of terror was brought in across the land, but in March 1939, Pfitzner himself welcomed Hitler to Prague Castle whilst he was on a visit, and he was appointed as a government commissioner in the administration of Prague, and was given the role of deputy mayor of Prague, with him being a Nazi deputy mayor. He was in control of all the publications which were being published in Prague, and he banned many other pieces of work, introducing his own form of Nazi censorship, and he also introduced pro-Nazi officials into different positions. Pfitzner wanted to remove everything from Prague that represented Czech national pride, and also he wanted to destroy Jewish monuments in line with the Nazi policies. He did argue with a number of officials, and he had one of his enemies arrested, and this man along with his supporters were then ruthlessly executed for resistance. But when Reinhard Heydrich came to Prague to serve as a Reich protector, Pfitzner tried to please the intimidating Heydrich, but Heydrich did not like him. Pfitzner had a bad reputation with other high-ranking Nazis, such as Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, and also the chief of Prague's Gestapo did not like him. Pfitzner felt like his position was being threatened, and he was given options to become a professor at a university in Berlin if he wanted to step down. But inside of Prague, Heydrich introduced a reign of terror. He was a serious SS officer and was very close friends with Heinrich Himmler, and Heydrich's job was to instigate a reign of terror to keep the land under submission and to prevent resistance and problems arising inside of Czech lands. He was a man who was directly responsible for the Einsatzgruppe, which caused chaos, slaughtering millions of people following advancements by the Wehrmacht, and this showed you the true evil of Heydrich. He was responsible for thousands of deaths, and he proclaimed martial law in Czech lands, and within 5 days of him arriving in Prague, 142 people had been executed, many of these in public. There were also 5,000 people arrested, and hundreds more were executed inside of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Many thousands of people were sent to concentration camps, and Heydrich's brutal policies served to stop resistance and to keep people in line, to keep the land productive for the Third Reich. However, following Heydrich's assassination and subsequent death, which occurred following an incident inside of Prague, Josef Pfitzner believed he could gain more power, and he mourned him in public heavily, and he then tried to gain more favour in the eyes of the Nazis. He was offered retirement by the ruthless official Karl Hermann Frank, who also became known for being a torturer and an executioner, but despite all of the efforts made by senior members of the Nazi Party, there was no job for Pfitzner inside of Berlin universities, as he was so universally disliked inside of Germany. He remained as a deputy mayor because of this, but he believed in Hitler, and he believed that the Third Reich could never fall, and he also ardently believed that the Germans could not lose the war. He remained inside of Bohemia, and he sent his family to Austria in April 1945, but at the end of the war he was captured by the American forces and was then placed under arrest. On the 21st of May 1945 he was handed over to the Czech police, and whilst locked up he wrote a detailed account of the collapse of the Nazis. He was interrogated and he claimed his nationality was German, and he distanced himself from the SS and the crimes of them, and he was said to have been overconfident, ironic, and a good speaker. But he tried to cover his own tracks, and he said that he was forced to appear as an ardent Nazi, and he told his interrogators that he had a huge amount of enemies inside the hierarchy of the party, and that he was disliked universally by all Nazi leaders. He tried to use this as a way to get off any future charges brought to him, but Josef Pfitzner was clearly a Nazi, and he had been for many years before the war broke out, and he was then brought to trial. He was tried in front of the Extraordinary People's Court in Prague, and many other Nazi war criminals such as Kurt de Luger, the chief of the Order Police, and Karl Hermann Frank would also be tried by these courts and judges. He was found guilty of a number of crimes, including speaking in favour of the Nazis, taking part in organisations, and also in defrauding the city of Prague in a number of damaging deals with the Germans. He was also linked to treason offences, and he would not have to wait long for his execution, as it was about to take place. Pfitzner was then sent to Pankrak prison for just a matter of hours to await his execution. Pankrak prison, a site which he was involved in overseeing, was a notorious Nazi prison during the war. One former inmate of it stated of the site, the cell was perhaps 8 feet long and 5 feet or 6 feet wide. At the entrance was a toilet bowl that also provided the only available drinking water. Hanging directly off one wall, there were 2 very narrow bunks stacked vertically. There was a tiny table and a single chair in the cell, and high up on the wall was a very small window. Because it was 12 feet off the ground, inmates could not see out of it. This cell was very cold and stiflingly hot in summer. Pankrak prison was also tremendously overcrowded, and inmates were given very little food. Every morning after coffee, rain or shine, there were outdoor exercises. Oftentimes, the guards beat inmates during the exercises and roll call. But Pfitzner was responsible for part of this. It was outside this horrific Nazi prison that Josef Pfitzner was to be executed. On the 6th of September 1945, he was led out to his execution scaffold. This was roughly 3 hours after he had been condemned to death by the court. On this scaffold were a number of gallows, which had been created from wood, and these were high above a large crowd of 50,000 people that had gathered to witness the proceedings. This gallows had been made next to Pankrak prison in a large courtyard, and his execution would be the final one that took place in public without being behind the gates of a prison or other sites inside of Czech lands. Thousands of people looked high up onto the scaffold, and the platform was so big that everyone could see. One witness claimed about the execution of Josef Pfitzner that 3 hours later the prisoner shuffled from the courthouse to a scarlet-draped gallows in a crowded public square. 3 black uniformed executioners, university students whom he had sent to the concentration camp, stood waiting. A murmur rippled through the tense crowd as the traitor reached the scaffold. The sentence was read again. The executioners lifted him up by a leather strap under his armpits in the crowd's full view. They slipped the noose around his neck. Suddenly, in a guttural German defiance, Pfitzner half shouted, half croaked, "I die for Germany." An angry executioner slapped the traitor in the face and sprang the trap. Josef Pfitzner was the deputy mayor of Prague, and he was someone who was not very well liked inside of Nazi Germany. Even Joseph Goebbels, the best friend of Hitler, disliked him, and he was someone who wanted to achieve more power, but there were more ruthless men from the SS such as Karl Hermann Frank, Kurt de Luger and Heydrich who were favoured over him, as they were seen to be more barbaric and in line with the Nazi views. He was a man who was condemned for defrauding the Czech capital and in the terror that was brought to the city during the German occupation. He was the last man publicly executed in front of thousands of people in Czechoslovakia, and 50,000 people saw him go to his death and many cheered when this happened. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.